Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Today, I'm joined by former Washington tight end Logan Paulsen, who was out at practice for most of the past week and was on with the team's Julie Donaldson throughout the week. Logan is always excellent at providing detail based on what he sees because he knows what to look for as much as anybody. Don't forget, I will be doing more drafts with Underdog Fantasy this month. I held one earlier in the week, quick, easy, cheap, no stress involved because there's nothing to maintain during the season. They do the work for you. You draft enough that it's not an issue. And I'm going to be likely doing another one on Sunday, so look for some more information on Twitter during the day. And you can read my story on Landon Collins, which is up now on ESPN.com. I'll just say, in the early part of camp, Collins has looked pretty good. You've listened to my takes all week now on various podcasts. If you haven't gotten them, go back and listen to them. They're all quick. But now I want you to hear from somebody else who has been out of practice. So let's get to my conversation with former tight end Logan Paulsen. He goes through the rookies as well as a number of other spots, including quarterback, of course, what he's seen from running back Antonio Gibson, is there any concerns about his toe, and much more. Logan, you had a chance to be out at practice this week, multiple days. Great opportunity to see some things. In general, what are some of your early impressions about what you saw out there this week?
So I think overall, I'm pretty impressed where the team was at. I think a lot of the question marks I had, especially about the young players, were answered. Seeing Sam Cosmi out there, heard early on that he was having a tough time in pass protection. And then, maybe it was the addition of the pads. Maybe he's just kind of getting more comfortable with the offense, but looked pretty good. Looked like a starting right tackle in the NFL. Obviously, he's not perfect by any stretch, but kind of quelled some of my concerns regarding his ability to play right tackle in the NFL. Obviously, I think I'm well documented as saying, I think he could be a very, very good player if he got a couple things fixed. And it appeared when I was there for my 4 days that those things were well on the way to being fixed. And then
I'm not to interrupt you. If I continue on that, we'll get back to those stuff. And I apologize for that. But what did you see that quelled those fears?
So some of the things that I talked about on this show before, in terms of hand placement, how he was setting in terms of hand carriage and pass protection, he seemed to have a much better carriage of his hands, a little higher, understanding, he doesn't have the longest arms in the whole world, but understanding how to fit on the defensive player. I saw a couple pass rushes with Chase Young where Chase tried to bull him. Guys with shorter arms have a hard time with that because they have less time to kind of absorb the force. And he kind of had a nice underhook on one side and a nice clamp on the upper breastplate and found a good footing, against Chase Young on 2 repetitions, and then was able to kind of move his feet and show that athleticism that everyone was talking about in the pre-draft process. So it made me feel really confident in the team drills. I thought he did a good job against Montez. Montez, I think, has been kind of getting after him. I kind of rely on you for the early camp stuff. And of course, he gave up some sacks and pressures to Montez, and Montez has some of the longest arms in the NFL. So that's a worst case scenario for him. But I saw him kind of understanding how to use his feet a little bit better and position himself a little bit better to kind of handle that long arm and those bull rushes from those 2 elite pass rushers.
And because those 2 are different pass rushers, how does that help him?
So I think it's awesome. You get Chase. I think Chase is trying to figure out his pass rushing philosophy a little bit still, right? me and you have talked at great lengths about how, Montez went from year 1 to year 2, and you saw an evolution in his production because he had a plan as a rusher, right? And I still think Chase is trying to figure that out. I think back to his college tape, and I think to myself, he's a guy who was used to having a tremendous get off, attacking the edges of tackles, and being one step ahead of the college tackles. Now, those guys are much better athletes. So you get different rush styles, right? You get a guy in Montez who's a little bit more edgy, great, dominant kind of long arm, right? And is really explosive off the edge. And Chase is still developing his plan as a pass rusher, but is a great athlete, very physical. I mean, you see him in person and it's impressive, right? He's like a Madden character, quite literally. He's how you would create somebody to play defensive end, and that's how he looks. And I think that's pretty spectacular. So to go against a guy with his athletic skill set and his physical tools every single day is just going to make him better, because Cosmi is going to develop methodologies for defeating different types of rushers. And it's awesome to have two kind of unique styles on the same team.
And that's why I asked it, because not only unique styles, but effective unique styles.
Right.
And that, you know what I mean? Guys who could be in that top 10 range as pass rushers this year.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And what other, before I cut you off, what were some of the other observations that you had?
So, and then you kind of go down the list in terms of draft picks, right? You look at Benjamin St-Juste and you say, there's a guy who kind of fits the evaluation, right? Physical, long arms, decent turning his hips. Like, obviously there could be some improvement there, but that was the tape from college kind of alluded to that a little bit. But a guy who could play outside the NFL, and that's ultimately what you want to see. Like, is he ready to do that right now? I mean, probably not, but it's coming along, and I think that is a positive sign, kind of a hit. I didn't watch De'Ami Brown a ton, but in what you do see, you see a guy who understands kind of the more nuanced side of route running, which is something I was concerned about. His route tree at Carolina was not overly demanding or complex, so you kind of wonder, like, how's he going to handle like these deep digs, these in cuts, the comebacks, like the more nuanced, shorter stuff. And you see a guy who has a technical acumen to do that, which is always great to see. And then Bates, I mean, we talked about him a lot. Like, in line, like, I was very impressed with him for a rookie to be coming and playing with the physicality that he had. I was very impressed. Obviously, as a pass protector, which is to be expected as a pass protector, because he showed struggles with that in college too, needs improvement. And then off the ball stuff, as we talked about, like, kind of they move the tight end around a little bit, insert him in like almost like a fullback. And he didn't do that a lot at Boise. So it doesn't look quite as dominant. And I use the word dominant because there were times where he's locking out defensive ends and driving guys down the field. And you're like, that's legit blocking tight end stuff. So I think that's going to pay dividends for the Washington football team. The other guy I was impressed with was the safety. I forget his name.
The draft, Derek Forrest.
Yes, Forrest, like bigger than I thought. And you kind of say, oh, well, he's big, so he can't move very well, but dexterous, aggressive to the football. And you see value there. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's good. Like, all the picks seem to kind of be who the evaluation process indicated they would be, except for perhaps maybe Jamin Davis. You saw my process with Jamin, like kind of talked myself into liking him more and more as the process went on, because the more you watch his tape, he shows good stuff. So I will say I didn't see that tremendous athlete that I saw at Kentucky. Now, there could be a myriad of reasons for that. He just had an eye injury a couple days ago. It's their first time in pads. He could be tired. They're putting a ton of stuff on him. He just didn't look as confident in diagnosing route concepts and in diagnosing coverages. Like, the one play that sticks out to me very vividly is they ran a keeper. So, like, fake run action left to the offensive left, quarterback boots to the offensive right, and then all the routes kind of roll to the offensive right to kind of match the quarterback. And in college, he was outstanding at getting under that over route that's at 10 yards. Like, he was very good at it. And then in the red zone period the other day, and granted, this is one rep, he just looked a little lost. He didn't know where to go. He didn't run to his spot the way he was. And again, he's learning a new defense. He's calling a defense. He's got tremendous responsibility. But I would say everybody of the draft picks, even like guys like Shaka Toney, like, they kind of fit with what you expected them to look like. And then Jamin was a little bit different. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I don't think you need to sell the car on that in any way. But, I think that's something that if I was going to practice, I would just keep an eye on. How is he mentally picking up? Can he start playing fast and playing with the athleticism that we saw during his pro day and then during the evaluation process in college?
And like you said, they're asking him to call signals and to see if he can handle that role, and then to see not only can he call the plays, but then process on the field with all that knowledge in there. So this is all because they can always slide into another spot if they needed to. And
I think another really good point to talk about is like NFL offenses are so much more complicated from a formation and from a personnel standpoint. So even pre-snap for him, he's got especially playing Mike, he's got so much more to digest. I know people want to give Bostic a hard time, but that guy is outstanding. Smart. At getting people lined up and getting the right defense called and understanding what the offense is trying to do. Like, he's been the starter in nickel. And I think the one reason you see him starting in base and nickel is because he's a smart dude. You know what I mean? And he's really lined up. And so the question is, can Jamin, who I think is a better athlete and has I got to see him in person. He walked by me. He is a big.
Yes, he is. Long arms.
Yes. It's all there physically. It's just about, I think, whether or not mentally they can, because again, they're putting him in a mic, which is a tremendous responsibility. So
right, and that's why I say that, because I know people are going to hear it and say, "Oh, they're going to freak out." But
No.
there is a learning process here for him, and part of that process for him is for them to see what can he handle. Now, this is the stuff that they didn't get to see from players last year. It's why it took several games into the season to make certain changes, not just quarterback, but others, because they didn't, not only did the players not get that experience, but the coaches didn't know what they could handle. Big difference.
And again, like for your listeners, like I think Jamin Davis still has the potential to be the rookie of the defensive rookie of the year. Like that's how highly I think of him. But I think the process for him in terms of growth is just it's slowed. You know what I mean? And that there's many reasons for that. So don't freak out about this. It's 8 days of training camp. Like there's so much more time to go here.
Hey folks, would you like free tickets for the preseason game against the Baltimore Ravens? Well, you're in luck, because our sponsor, Prosper Insurance, is giving a ticket to anyone who gets a home and auto quote with them. You don't even have to buy a policy to get the free ticket, although the savings will absolutely make you want to switch today. Finding the right insurance can be a pain, but Prosper makes the process easy, all while providing great service and advice. Their licensed advisors shop the market with top companies like Allstate, Nationwide, Progressive, Travelers, and more to find you the perfect coverage at a great rate, which is just a few of the many reasons why Prosper has over 1,000 five-star reviews on Google. You have nothing to lose. Simply visit prosper.insurance/KEIM to get your quote and a free ticket to the Baltimore preseason game on August 28th. That's prosper.insurance/KEIM, KEIM, no.com. Get ready to feel good about your insurance. What's the hardest position for you to gauge how a guy is doing in camp?
I think the hardest one, just in terms of evaluation period, is defensive back, I think.
Yep.
Because they're not involved in every single play, right? Like they're on the field, but let's say the coverage rolls to the 3-by-1 side and the quarterback's reading away. He gets kind of beat, but you don't really know if it's real or not, because he knows that the read's the other side, and he's kind of playing this soft, like slew-footed cover 3. So you're like, is that how he's supposed to do it? You know what I mean? And then again, like how physical is he with receivers? That stuff comes across in practice. You know what I mean? Like we talked about the DB from Minnesota. I'm blanking on his name right now. St. Just, yeah. And I think you see those physical attributes, but then you kind of wonder, like, oh, I didn't see him defend any deep posts, which he had a hard time with in college. So has he got that corrected? Are they going to ask him to do that even? Like, are they going to kind of totally game plan around that skill set or what? So I think those guys can be, like Landon Collins is another great example. Like, I thought he looked good. He's moving well, physically moved well, but like, is he in the right spot? Is he fitting in the right area? Like, you don't really know. It's hard to do that in practice, I guess.
Well, and I always have a hard time with safeties for that reason, because it's also like, you come up and you know how it is in practice. Well, I'm going to tap you.
Yeah.
I'm going to tap you. Like, I got you down because I tapped you. Well, in the game, that tap could be a broken tackle, but it'll also then, like, are you coming up at the same angle, and what angles you're taking, and how are you reading it? I always have a hard time with safeties, and that's why people always freak out with Troy Apke. But last year in camp, he looked pretty good. Now, if they had played preseason games, I think you see something different.
Right.
And it would have given them a better evaluation. But the problem was that he looked better than the other guys at that position. And you can blame, people can freak out about him, but I'd get mad at the others at the position last year, because in practice, that's how it looked. They didn't have the games to go evaluate, and the practices can really fool you at times.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think especially with safeties, right? Like I remember when I was in Atlanta, like they always talked about how their midfield safety was like the center fielder for the defense, like nothing could get by them. And so they had some guys that looked pretty dang good at tracking the ball and taking good angles. And then all of a sudden, when they had a real live ball carrier and the ball was in their hand and they were tracking that ball carrier, they started taking creative angles because they didn't like either know how to tackle or feel comfortable tackling these bigger guys. So I think, again, like everyone's like freaking out about 4 preseason games, but I love the 4 preseason games because it gave you good time to make these decisions,
Yeah, and like I said, the coaches need to know, and the
Right.
coaches did not know. They didn't know how Dwayne Haskins was going to handle something. They didn't know how Apke
Right.
was going to look. And for a guy like Antonio Gibson last year, he had to learn to be a running back in the regular season. He didn't have the value. So I think there's a lot of value. What do you read into when things are like? What are some of the little things you're going to read into in camp to say, oh, maybe this guy is further ahead on a list than others think?
So I think the biggest one for me was Hemingway in the tight end position. Like he was a guy that I had kind of written off. I thought you bring Ricky Seals-Jones in to kind of back up and be like your move kind of F tight end, a guy who's going to make a lot of plays in the passing game. Then you talk to the tight end coach a little bit. You watch how they're allocating them during special teams period and how they're allocating them in like team run. And Hemingway is the guy that's in there.
He's in there a lot.
And he's physical. He does a good job. He's got a nice knack for like that fullback type stuff we said that Bates was struggling with. So if he could kind of clamp that down and perform on special teams, I think he's got the best path right now. Sam East is a little banged up at the moment, not practicing. So he's not getting better. But I think if you're keeping 3 right now, I think Ricky Seals-Jones is outside looking in because I think they've got 2 guys they really like at Bates and Hemingway in the sense that like they're physical, tough. And Hemingway, like I always thought he was more of a receiver, but he's a physical looking guy and he plays physically. He gets chippy. He's got a nice attitude. So he's a guy that I, in watching practice, I became more impressed with him as the day went on. And then the other guy that really stood out to me, to be quite frank, is AGG. And I'm not saying like AGG is going to be the next, Brandon Marshall or anything like that. But in terms of showing signs of life, you know what I mean? Because I thought he was dead in the water totally. But then you go out there and he's showing nice footwork on the releases. Obviously, there's still he's still so green, like there's still a lot of areas to improve there for him. But showing an ability to win 50-50 balls, like that is good because that's why he's here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they want you.
Yep.
And it's funny because like with Hemingway, he's really good as a move blocker.
Yep.
And we talked the other day that's what Bates is not as good at. Bates is much better in line. So you have 2, and in that fullback role, you need that guy who can do that.
Right.
Hemingway gives you that. And so that's why, I've been talking to some people too. I'm like, if I had to put up my 53 now, he's on the roster.
He's on the roster. I agree.
Before camp, I put Seals-Jones just because he's a vet. But I had Hemingway, and then I switched it because I'm going with the vet. This guy's got, 1 catch in the NFL?
Yeah.
But this is a group that liked him. And with AGG, I agree. I think last year he looked – there wasn't – I've said this before on the podcast. There was not a single play last summer where I said, oh, that's why they drafted him. And you should be able to see that, right? Now, there are reasons for that. It was their first time on the field with these guys. Not everybody is going to develop the same way. I get that. But the bottom line is you didn't see it. Well, this year you're seeing it. And this is their pick. the offensive coordinator, Scott Turner, liked him coming out, and so I don't think they're going to give up on him casually. So I
don't think they should, to be quite honest. He's a big athletic guy. My one question for him in terms of making the team is how does he handle the special teams role? You know what I mean? Like Julie asked me that question. I thought, man, Julie, that's such a great question, Julie Donaldson, because that he's going to be kind of the bottom guy in that room.
Correct.
Can he contribute on special teams? Because we've seen like that 5th, 6th maybe receiver spot has to be kind of a dog on special teams, and can he do that? So
can he do that? And then one benefit they have is Cam Sims can do that. And so he, Cam is really good in that area, and they may keep another receiver who might be a returner too. Yeah. And AGG might be inactive for a lot of those games. But that guy traditionally, speaking of special teams, and I mentioned this with Troy Apke the other day about how if you want to look for clues as to where guys are, you look at the special teams units. People freak out, but it's like, I can't help it. I don't put guys out there. It doesn't mean that he's great from scrimmage. It just means, so that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, what are some little things, if you're a player that you're going to look into to see what are my chances? Like, are there some little things that, others, again, outside here might not look at, but that a player is going to look at to see what are my real chances?
Yeah. So one of the big things is like, obviously people they go to practice, they say, oh, let's take Apke as an example. He's working with the 3s, like he's screwed. He's playing a new position, like he's out.
And he hasn't looked great either at times.
Yeah, I know. But what I look at with Apke, because he in my mind, reads like almost a punter, a kicker, or a long snapper. Like that is his role, and he is playing special teams, right? Like I told you this the other day, like Danny Smith told me the most important position on the special teams outside of your punter is your gunner. And Apke plays gunner, and he plays it pretty darn good. And he's big and he's fast, and that's what you're looking for at that spot. So think about this. Like, you punt the ball 50 yards down the field, right? If you get a guy that's down there in the returner's face, like making him fair catch it, which you talked about Cam Sims, he did a great job of doing that last year.
That was really good.
That adds tremendous value to your defense, right? Because if you start a drive inside the 20-yard line, like the chances of that of an opposing team scoring on that drive is like it's like 5% or some ridiculous statistic like that. So that's where his value is. He's going to play on all core special teams. So when I look at Apke and I say I go to practice, he's starting on punt. He's starting on punt return. He's starting on kickoff. He's starting on kickoff return. He's a 4 core special teams player, and he's starting on all of them. Now, that's subject to change, obviously, but I think the special teams guy probably looks at that and says, this guy is a guy that I want. And the special teams guy, depending on his influence in the room, can keep up to 4 guys that he wants, that are teams that are offensive and defensive players. He can be like, I want these guys for teams. Like Niles Pauls for a couple of years when he was the PT of the punt team. He played a little gunner. He did all sorts of stuff. He was a guy that Danny Smith was like, I want him on the team. You know what I mean? And like that's how he stuck around for a couple of years until he became the baller at tight end. You know what I'm saying? So I think people need to keep that in mind when they look at the depth charts and stuff.
And I'm not even trying to advocate or push for anybody. I just know the criticism and a lot of it's deserved. It's deserved for his play on the field. We all saw it. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with what anybody says out there, but you can't assume certain things just because of that. And that's what I'm looking at because, it is separate. It's like we brought like Jared Norris made the team special teams. He's not going to play from scrimmage. It's just special teams. How many guys can you have that don't play from scrimmage? I don't know.
Right.
DeShazer Everett has made a career to that. Now he also has developed its safety, much better safety. I like DeShazer. So there are different things. Moving on from that, because again, I don't want to sit there and talk about a lot of Troy Apke. I just know that perception of him, and I'm just telling people like this is also what we're seeing when you're trying to compile the 53. These are I'm just
using him as an example, but like that, those tiers of the depth chart for special teams, in some ways, in terms of determining the bottom half of the roster, are almost more important than what you're getting on the offensive defense.
And just for people listening, I did mention others who were on those lists the other day because I agree with you, Logan. Just a couple more things. Quarterbacks, what have you seen from that group?
Yeah, so I think it's been kind of what I expected. Like Fitzpatrick's looked good. He looks like an NFL starting quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, is he a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? Like, probably not. Is he a top 20? Maybe, right? Is he one of the better, like would he be kind of middle of the pack in terms of quarterbacks I've played with in my career? Yeah. And I think that gives you a shot to win football games, right? He seems to understand the offense. He understands the formation advantages that Scott Turner's trying to give him, like all those things. Like I think there's been a lot of talk about the competition. To me, it's at least the 4 days I was at practice, it's Fitzpatrick all the way. If you're betting on it like that line, I think it should be 100% Fitzpatrick because while Heineke looks very good, he's a little off schedule. And those are things that younger quarterbacks do, right? They hold the ball a little bit long. They wait for stuff to come open. With Fitzpatrick, none of that's there. None of that hesitation. I'm Fitzpatrick all the way at this point.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think I know Taylor had a really good practice on what's today, Friday. He had a good practice on Thursday, a couple dimes. He shows his stuff. He shows what he can do, and I think the good thing for him is that players do like him. So if nothing else, if he has to come into a game, they have some trust for him. So last thing, I just want I'll go on 2 more guys, Antonio Gibson and then Terry McLaurin. I want to bring up Terry McLaurin because I've kind of talked a lot about him on here and things that you pick up watching him. And I'll go back and watch the practice video I shoot just to try and see like what does this guy do different as a route runner. Yeah. But he seems I don't know from your perspective, and I know you were tight end versus receiver, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of noise in his body when he runs routes. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it or not, but
I think that's exactly right. I think when you look at really good route runners, there's like I don't know if you've heard the expression like fast, but be fast but smooth, right? Really good route runners have that ability. Like Pierre Garçon had that ability, and he's a very good route runner. You know what I mean? Just had this ability to like be fast, but like be in total control of his body.
Right.
And when I see Terry practicing, he practices with that kind of deliberate focus as a route runner. And I think, for a long time, I didn't understand why Terry was so good. I understand, like, he doesn't have any, like, I played with Julio Jones. I played with Pierre. I played with these guys who are big, I played with DeAndre Hopkins, like big physical guys that you can immediately see it. He's not really like that, but you see it, you see his tremendous value. You see what makes him great in his, in his preparation and his attention to detail when he runs routes specifically.
I love watching him run routes, and I use him as a blueprint for everybody else that follows him in the line to see, do they run with the same stem? And if you're not, then it's like, well, this is why he creates separation. It's that patience. You create that separation top route because you're willing to do a harder stem because you're not as
right.
You're fast, but you're not in a hurry. Whereas I see some other guys, they don't do the stem the same way. Maybe they don't create the same separation.
Right.
So he does. And I think it's that adherence to details and the patience with which he goes. Last guy, Antonio Gibson, early thoughts.
I think, I was kind of worried because, I've had turf toe before. I missed the whole season with a turf toe injury, and I've talked to guys and just how it can linger and stick around. And it's so important for your explosive burst. And I was kind of expecting to see a guy a little bit more hobbled, but he made some really nice runs, looking powerful. He's much bigger than you think. Like when you see him, like he's a big dude. Yeah. And he runs strong. He's got that nice elusiveness, and he's got great burst. Like that burst was there. I was expecting to see a guy who didn't quite have that fifth gear, and it was there. He had a couple runs, like, and it's hard. Again, it's hard to evaluate backs in practice. You know what I mean? But in terms of hitting the hole, bursting through the hole, I think people probably have heard that before. Like not dawdling in there and just running through. He looked great, and it quelled a lot of my concerns about where he was in terms of the recovery process.
Yeah, me too. I think early on in camp, there was a couple questions like, "Oh, did you see this? Am I seeing this right?"
Yeah.
But what I said this the other day, but what you also know is he hasn't sat out. And
yeah.
That to me is a tell. Is if it's bothering you, they're going to limit him or all that. They haven't been limiting him, so I think he certainly seems to be good to go. So. Right. Anyway, Logan, I appreciate you joining me. Always love the breakdowns, and it's been fun seeing you out of practice.
Oh, thanks, man. It was great seeing you too, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
Let's talk about Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best and easiest place to play fantasy football for big cash prizes. On Underdog Fantasy, you just draft. No need to worry about waivers, lineups, or injuries. Underdog handles it all for you. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app, draft a season-long best ball team, and that's it. No in-season management. They're going to give you $25 when you sign up, so you can take a free shot at a $1 million grand prize in their fantasy football tournament. That's right. You can get a free $25 in bonus cash on Underdog Fantasy if you use the code KEIM, K-E-I-M, when you make your first deposit. I love Underdog because it's just so easy to use. The mobile app is slick, the website is user-friendly, so do what I've been doing. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com, join a league, draft a team, and that's it. You're good for the season. Remember, go to UnderdogFantasy.com, the App Store, or the Google Play Store, sign up with the code KEIM, K-E-I-M, and get a free $25 in bonus cash. That's it for this episode. I know there's a practice Friday night, but unless something big happens, the next report will come Sunday afternoon when Washington resumes practice in Ashburn. Talk to you next time.